bullet left the barrel at 2,920 feet per second, 7.9 seconds of flight time, across 2.5 miles of hostile desert air. 13 of America's deadliest military snipers had already failed. 13 operators, with over 200 confirmed combat missions between them. 13 warriors who had made impossible shots in mountains and jungles and urban kill zones where a single mistake meant death, all defeated by distance, by wind, by sheer odds, sheer audacity, attempting something that existed at the edge of human capability. Now a woman stood at the firing line, 5'6", 130 pounds, 28 years old, so quiet that grown men with decades of combat experience had not noticed her presence until someone spoke her name. She had removed her boots, stood barefoot on concrete hot enough to blister skin, spent 6 minutes in absolute stillness while skeptics whispered about breakdowns and failures and the inevitable proof that some barriers existed for biological reasons. They thought she was freezing under pressure. They were wrong. She was hunting, and the prey was impossible itself. But if she failed, if both female shooters competing today missed their shots, Pentagon officials watching via satellite would cite it as biological limitation evidence, proof that women did not belong in Tier 1 sniper roles. 40 years of progress erased by 2 missed shots on a single afternoon. The stakes were not personal, they were generational. Arizona sun did not hang in the sky so much as assaulted, 105 degrees Fahrenheit, at Yuma Proving Ground, where the United States military tested weapons too destructive for civilized places. Meat that turned breathing into deliberate labor. Heat that made metal too hot to touch with bare hands. Heat that created mirages where light bent through superheated air and the world appeared to melt at its edges. 13 men stood in a ragged line across the firing range, boots planted in sand that could burn through leather if you stayed still too long. These were not ordinary soldiers. These were ghosts, men who lived in classified files and operated in countries where America officially had no presence. 5 Navy SEAL snipers, 4 Marine Scout snipers, 2 Delta Force operators, 2 Army Rangers. Between them, they held over 200 confirmed missions across deserts in Iraq, mountains in Afghanistan, jungles in Colombia where operations never made the evening news. They had come for what the military called the Impossible Shot Challenge, a test that existed at the intersection of human capability and pure physics, a demonstration that some target hence lay beyond even elite reach. The target sat 4,000 meters downrange, 2.5 miles, a steel plate measuring 24 inches square, positioned on the far side of a canyon that carved through the desert like an ancient wound. At that distance, through air that shimmered and danced with heat, the target appeared smaller than a postage stamp held at arm's length. The human eye could barely perceive it as anything more than a dark smudge against sandstone cliffs. The human hand, even guided by the finest rifles American engineering could build, never successfully struck it under combat conditions, until today maybe. Wind blew cross-range at 18 miles per hour, gusting unpredictably to 25. Anemometers mounted at 500-meter intervals told part of the story. But wind at 4,000 meters was a different creature entirely. Humidity measured 8%, so dry that lips cracked and throats burned with each inhalation. These were the worst possible conditions for precision shooting, which was exactly the point. Wars were not fought in climate-controlled facilities. They were fought in places where nature itself seemed hostile to human intention. Colonel James Whitmore stood before the assembled shooters, his uniform pressed despite the oppressive heat, his posture military perfect despite 59 years of gravity pulling at his spine. He had spent 42 years in the Army, most of them teaching young men how to kill from distances so great the enemy never heard the shot that ended them. He believed in standards. He believed in tradition. He believed that some things should remain sacred. Gentlemen, Whitmore's voice carried the authority of 4 decades in command. You represent the finest long-range marksmen in the United States military. Each of you has made shots in combat that most men would consider impossible. Today you face a different challenge. He paused, letting the weight settle over them like the desert heat. No enemy fire, no time pressure, just you, your rifle, and a target that has defeated every shooter who has attempted it. Another pause. The rules are simple. Each shooter receives 2 rounds, 50 caliber BMG, 750 grain Hornady AMAX. You will use identical Macmillan TAC-50 rifles, identical Schmidt and Bender scopes. No excuses about equipment. The men nodded. They understood. At 4,000 meters, a bullet would be in flight for nearly 8 seconds. 8 seconds, where 1,000 variables could turn a perfect shot into a failure measured in feet. One more thing. Something in Whitmore's tone made the men look up. We have 15 shooters today. Not 13, murmur rippled through the line. Confusion mixed with curiosity. The competition had strict entry requirements. Only the most elite units received invitations. Only shooters with proven combat records qualified. Who could possibly? Gentlemen, Whitmore's voice carried an edge now. Chief Kiera Blackwell and Lieutenant Tessa Vaughn. From the back of the observation area, 2 figures moved, small, slight, unassuming. Men turned and saw them for the first time, though both women had been standing there for 20 minutes. Somehow, impossibly not one of the 13 male shooters had noticed their presence until this moment. Chief Petty Officer Kiera Blackwell wore the same desert camouflage they did. The Navy SEAL Trident insignia on her chest caught sunlight like a challenge. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight braid. Her face showed no expression beyond professional composure. She was maybe 5'6", perhaps 130 pounds, and she looked about as dangerous as someone's high school English teacher. Lieutenant Tessa Vaughn stood beside her, Air Force rescue, taller, broader, but still small by military standards. Her blonde hair was cropped short. Her expression carried the careful neutrality that came from proving yourself in rooms that did not want you there. They stepped forward together, boots making no sound on the concrete, movements economical and precise. They were wasting energy on unnecessary motion. Neither met anyone's eyes. They simply took their places at the end of the line, 14th and 15th in sequence. Last to shoot. The silence that followed carried weight like a physical presence. Lieutenant Cole Harper broke the silence first. He was 37, muscular in the way men become when they spend half their lives in gyms and the other half in combat. SEAL Team 7, 94 confirmed combat missions across Iraq and Afghanistan had given him confidence that bordered on arrogance. His face, tanned to leather by sun and wind, showed the certainty that came from surviving situations that killed lesser men, sir. Harper addressed Whitmore, but kept his eyes on Kiera and Tessa. With all due respect, this is the impossible shot challenge. The finest military snipers in the world compete here. He paused, not quite saying what he meant, but saying it anyway. This is not a diversity demonstration. Other men nodded. Not all of them, but enough the gesture rippled down the line like wind through wheat. Whitmore's jaw tightened. Chief Blackwell and Lieutenant Vaughn were invited by Naval Special Warfare Command, based on their combat records and demonstrated capability. They earned their places here the same way you did, Lieutenant, by being among the best, the best. Harper's laugh carried contempt wrapped in professional courtesy. Sir, I mean no disrespect to Chief Blackwell or Lieutenant Vaughn. I'm sure they're competent operators. But we're talking about a 4,000-meter shot in conditions that would challenge the greatest snipers in history. He gestured toward the distant target, shimmering in heat mirage, like something seen through troubled water. This requires. And what exactly does it require, Lieutenant? The voice came from behind them, sharp as a rifle crack. Every head turned. Colonel Grace Thornton walked toward them with the careful gait of someone whose knees had absorbed too many parachute landings, whose back had carried too many wounded brothers, whose body kept score of every firefight over 40 years of service. She was 64 years old, retired 8 months now, but everyone on that range knew exactly who she was. Ghost 6, the legend, the first woman to graduate Marine Scout Sniper School in 1983, the operator who had served in Grenada, Panama, the first Gulf War, Somalia, who had made shots that existed only in classified after-action reports. 112 confirmed combat missions across 4 decades. The woman who had trained 3 generations of Marine Scout snipers and SEAL team marksmen. 40 years of creating some of the deadliest shooters America could produce, and she was furious. Grace wore no uniform, civilian clothes, jeans and a faded Marine Corps shirt that had seen better decades. But when those pale blue eyes locked on Lieutenant Harper, the younger man actually took a step backward. Master Chief, Harper found his voice, though it lacked its earlier confidence. I meant no disrespect. I'm simply stating the obvious physical reality. You are stating your assumptions, Lieutenant. There's a difference. Grace stopped 3 feet from Harper, close enough that he could see the scars on her hands, weathered lines around her eyes that came from squinting through scopes in 100 different deserts, close enough to smell decades of gun oil and cordite embedded in her skin. Chief Blackwell completed 3 combat tours in Afghanistan. Grace's voice quiet now, more dangerous. 71 confirmed combat missions. Longest shot, 2,430 meters under fire. She saved 28 SEALs from a Taliban ambush in Kandahar province. Using skills you haven't learned yet, she paused, and apparently lacked the humility to recognize you need. Grace's eyes swept the line of men. Some had the decency to look uncomfortable. Lieutenant Vaughn. 2 tours, 53 confirmed missions. Made a 1,900-meter shot in Syria that extracted 4 downed pilots from an ISIS kill zone. Another pause. You stand here and question the capability based on what? Their size? Their gender? You're not questioning them, Lieutenant. You're revealing your own limitations. Harper's face reddened, but he held Grace's gaze. I just think. Then stop thinking and start watching. You might learn the difference between competence and arrogance before this day ends. Grace turned her back on him, a gesture of dismissal that stung worse than any words could. Walked to where Kiera stood. Quiet and still at the end of the line, Grace did not speak to her, did not need to, just stood beside her, a message to every man on that range. She is mine. I trained her. Doubt her at your peril. But Grace's face showed something else too. Something the men could not see. Fear because 30 minutes earlier, before the shooters assembled, Colonel Whitmore had pulled Grace aside. Voice low. Expression troubled. Colonel Thornton, I need you to understand what's at stake here. Grace had nodded, thinking he meant the competition. Pentagon is watching this via satellite feed. Whitmore continued. If both female shooters fail today, both of them, they're citing it as biological limitation evidence. Proof that women don't belong in Tier 1 sniper roles. Grace's stomach had dropped. Sir, that's not. I know. But Admiral Richardson at SOCOM is looking for any excuse to reverse the 2016 integration policy. He's calling it combat effectiveness optimization, quietly building a case that the experiment failed. Whitmore had looked away, toward the distant target wavering in mirage, your legacy, Colonel. 40 years of proving women can fight at the highest level. It all rides on whether one of them, Blackwell or Vaughn, make a shot that 13 elite male snipers will likely miss. Grace had felt 40 years of weight settle on shoulders already carrying too much. Does Chief Blackwell know? No. And you won't tell her. Pressure like that destroys performance. So Grace stood beside Kiera now, carrying knowledge the younger woman could not bear. Knowing that if Kiera failed, if both women failed, it would not just be their careers that ended. It would be the careers of every woman who came after. Observation area fell into tense silence. Whitmore cleared his throat. Shooter 1, you are on the line. Let's begin. The first shooter was a SEAL Team 2 operator, 16 years in the teams. A veteran of operations across the Middle East, whose name appeared in no public records, but was spoken with respect in quiet rooms where quiet men discussed violent work. He approached the firing line with confidence born from nearly 2 decades of making shots other men called impossible. He settled behind the Macmillan TAC-50, a rifle that weighed nearly 30 pounds, and fired bullets the size of a man's finger. The 50 caliber BMG round could punch through engine blocks, destroy light vehicles, kill from distances that seemed to violate physics itself. In the right hands, it was a surgical instrument. In the wrong hands, just an expensive way to miss. The shooter checked his data. Wind speed. At the firing line, 18 miles per hour, gusting to 22. Temperature 115 degrees. Humidity 8%. He consulted his Kestrel 5700 elite weather meter, fed data into the applied ballistics computer. The device calculated windage, Coriolis effect, spin drift, everything physics could predict. He made his adjustments, breathed settled, squeezed, the rifle roared. A sound like a small explosion that echoed across the desert and sent shockwaves through the heat mirage. Through spotting scopes, observers watched the trace, the faint distortion in the air that marked the bullet's supersonic passage. 7.8 seconds later, erupted from the canyon wall. 4 feet left of the target, missed. The shooter swore softly, professionally, adjusted his scope, calculated again. The wind had shifted during the bullet's flight. Or maybe the mirage had fooled his eye. Or maybe at 4,000 meters, the margin for error was simply too small for human capability to overcome. Second shot, same careful preparation, same calculation, same controlled breathing. The rifle spoke again. This time, 2.5 feet right of target, closer. But in precision, shooting closer meant nothing. A miss was a miss. Whether you failed by inches or miles, the enemy stayed alive and your mission failed the same. The shooter stood, frustration evident in the set of his shoulders. Walked back to the observation area without a word. 14 shooters watched. One woman watched, carried the weight of 40 years on shoulders that looked too small to bear it. Shooter 2 approached the line. Marine Corps distinguished marksman, man who had made shots in Fallujah that people still discussed in hushed tones among those who knew. He used a different approach, relying less on computers, trusting mathematics over instinct. First shot landed short by 75 meters. The bullet impacted the canyon floor, sending up a plume of dust that looked like a small mortar strike. Wind changed mid-flight. The Marine muttered, making rapid adjustments. Second shot went over by 30 meters, impacting the canyon rim above the target. 2 misses, 2 failures. The pattern continued. Shooter 3, Delta Force, 20 years in special operations. Man whose face was literally classified, whose existence in certain countries was officially denied. 2 misses, 1 left, 1 right, separated by 6 feet of empty air on opposite sides of the target. Shooter 4, Army Ranger, veteran of more firefights than he could count, survivor of ambushes that killed harder men, possessor of skills honed across a decade of warfare. 2 misses, both short gravity winning its eternal fight against trajectory. Shooter 5, SEAL Team 6, a man whose name could not be spoken in public, whose missions existed only in files marked with classifications beyond top secret. 2 misses, close enough to make hearts race, far enough to make hearts sink. One by one, the finest military snipers in America faced the 4,000 meters shot. One by one they failed, not from lack of skill, not from poor equipment, but because at that distance in those conditions, the universe itself seemed to conspire against success. Grace watched each attempt with the analytical eye of someone who had spent 40 years teaching this craft. Beside her, Kiera stood motionless, her face revealing nothing. But she was not watching the target. Her eyes tracked other things, the way sand lifted and swirled in patterns across the desert floor, the way heat shimmer created layers in the air like stratified glass, the way distant canyon walls absorbed and radiated thermal energy in rhythms, only visible to those who knew how to see them, the way light refracted through air masses of different temperatures, creating illusions that defeated men who trusted their eyes over their understanding. She was reading a language the others did not speak. Shooter 7 stepped to the line. Lieutenant Cole Harper, SEAL Team 7, 94 confirmed combat missions. Cocky, confident, certain, he took his time, making a show of his preparation, checking and rechecking calculations, adjusting his position with exaggerated precision. He glanced back once at Kiera, a look that said without words, "Watch how a professional does this." But before he settled fully behind the rifle, Kiera spoke. Her voice was quiet, barely carrying across the concrete platform. But in the desert silence, every word landed like a stone in still water. "You're aiming where the mirage shows it, Lieutenant, not where the steel actually is." Harper froze. For a moment, genuine anger flashed across his face. Then he forced it down, replaced it with professional dismissal. He positioned himself, refusing to acknowledge her words. First shot. The rifle thundered, 7.8 seconds of flight time. Impact 3 feet high, 2 feet right. His confidence cracked like sun-baked earth. He adjusted, breathing pattern becoming less controlled, his movements less certain. Calculated again, lined up again. Second shot. Missed 2 feet left. 1 foot low, Harper stood slowly, his face burning red, not from heat, but from humiliation deeper than any wound. He had talked the loudest, questioned the hardest, and failed in the exact way Kiera had predicted. As he walked back past her, he kept his eyes forward, jaw clenched, able or unwilling to meet her gaze, though she was not looking at him anyway. She was watching the wind flags at the 2,000-meter mark, noting how they moved in rhythms the computer could not capture, patterns the weather meters could not predict. 7 shooters, down 8 to go. Each failure added weight to the atmosphere. These were not amateurs missing easy shots. These were apex predators of the military sniper world, men who had killed from distances that made conventional soldiers question the laws of physics, and they were being humbled by distance and wind, and the sheer audacity of attempting something that existed at the far edge of human capability. Shooter 8 was Lieutenant Tessa Vaughn. She approached the firing line with controlled professionalism, no swagger, no hesitation, just the careful competence of someone who had proven herself in rooms that did not want her there. Tessa settled behind the rifle, took her time with preparation, consulted the ballistic computer, checked wind flags, made her calculations. First shot, the rifle roared. Through spotting scopes, observers saw dust erupt 3 feet left of target. 1 foot low, close, agonizingly close. But a miss. Tessa adjusted, breathed, settled again. Second shot, 2 feet right, 6 inches high. Opposite side from the first shot, Miss Tessa stood slowly. Her face showed disappointment but not surprise. She had known the odds, had understood that 4,000 meters in these conditions was barely possible, even for the best shooters in the world. As she walked back, she passed Kiera. Their eyes met for just a second. Tessa gave the smallest nod, a gesture that said, "Your turn. Show them what we can do." Then she was passed, taking her place among the men who had also failed. No different, no special treatment. Just another shooter who had attempted the impossible and come up short. Shooters 9 through 13 followed, each one highly trained, extensively practiced, products of systems that had worked for decades. Shooter 9, Marine who had been shooting since before most of the others were born. Gray-haired at 52, weathered by deployments to 3 different wars. 2 misses, both agonizingly close. One just inches from the edge of the target plate, close enough to make men lean forward in their seats, close enough to taste success before physics snatched it away. Shooter 10, a Ranger who had made a legendary shot in Baghdad that saved an entire platoon. A man whose competence was proven a dozen firefights, 2 misses, and the look on his face suggested he could not quite believe what was happening, could not reconcile his proven skill with this particular failure. Shooter 11, Delta Force, 18 years of covert operations in places where America officially had no soldiers. A man who had made shots that defied belief in environments that defied acknowledgement. He approached the firing line with composed confidence, not arrogance, just quiet certainty that comes from 10,000 hours of practice. He spent 5 full minutes preparing, not for show, just methodical, careful preparation that spoke of someone who understood the magnitude of what he was attempting. When he finally settled behind the rifle, his breathing was perfectly controlled. His body position, textbook perfect. First shot. Through the spotoscope's, observers saw something that made hearts stop, dust erupting just 5 inches left of target center. Not a hit, but closer. Dramatically, heartbreakingly closer than anyone else had come. Murmur rippled through the observation area. Possibility suddenly seemed real. He could do it. On the second shot, with that adjustment, he could actually. The Delta operator made a micro-adjustment to his scope, quarter minute of angle, barely perceptible. He settled back in breathing controlled, mind-focused. Every ounce of skill and experience channeled into this single moment. Second shot, the rifle thundered. 7.8 seconds of flight time. Every eye on the range, watching through optics. Here it's suspended, breath held, impact 9 inches right of target. Opposite side from the first shot, missed. The operator stood slowly. For the first time that day, someone spoke what everyone was thinking. The wind is not consistent. His voice, carrying in the desert's silence. There's a pattern, but it's organic, not mathematical. It cycles in a way I cannot model. I cannot predict it. He walked back. And though he had failed, there was respect in how the other shooters looked at him. He had come closest. He had proven it might be possible. He just could not make the final leap from possible to actual. While he spoke, Kiera's eyes tracked the wind flags again, noted the timing, counted seconds in her head. A small nod, almost imperceptible. Port, she had found it. Shooters 12 and 13 approached with less confidence than their predecessors. They both failed, both missing by margins that would have been impressive if at any other distance. But here represented just more data points in a growing catalog of impossibility. The sun had moved across the sky. 2 hours had passed. 13 of the world's finest military snipers had fired 26 rounds at a target 4,000 meters away. 26 failures. 26 rounds of taxpayer-funded ammunition converted into dust clouds and disappointment. The atmosphere hung heavy with frustration and wounded pride. These were men accustomed to success, to being the best at what they did, to solving problems that made other people quit. And they had been beaten, not by an enemy, not by circumstances beyond their control, but by distance and wind, and the humbling realization that some shots might truly be impossible. Colonel Whitmore stepped forward, preparing to make an announcement, to call the competition, to acknowledge that perhaps the impossible shot earned its name for a reason, sir. The voice was understated, almost lost in the desert wind, but it stopped Whitmore mid-breath. Chief Petty Officer Kiera Blackwell had spoken for the first time all day. She stepped forward from the end of the line, moving with grace that seemed incongruous with the military precision around her. No swagger, no confidence display, just quiet certainty. Chief Blackwell, Whitmore said, "You are shooter 14. You're up." Lieutenant Harper could not help himself. The words came out before better judgment could stop them. "Sir, with all respect, if 13 of us could not make the shot, what logical basis exists for believing? Close your mouth and open your eyes." Grace Thornton's voice cut through like a blade through silk, not loud, just absolutely certain. "You might learn the difference between competence and arrogance." Harper fell silent, but his skepticism radiated from him like heat from sun-baked stone. Kiera reached the firing line, did something that made every observer pause. She removed her boots, bare feet on the hot Arizona sand. Men exchanged glances, confusion rippling through the group like wind through dry grass. Was this some kind of ritual? Some psychological preparation? Or was the pressure already breaking her before she had even touched the rifle? Grace spoke softly to Colonel Whitmore, though her voice carried intentionally to the others. "She's reading ground vibration signatures. Thermal differential through skin contact." Gathering data boots would filter out. Whitmore searched for words. "That's not standard procedure, Colonel." "No, sir, it's not. Standard procedure just failed 13 times. Watch what non-standard looks like." Kiera stood motionless on concrete that had to be scalding hot, but her face showed no discomfort. Only concentration that seemed to pull her away from the physical world into something deeper. Something that existed beyond pain or heat, or the weight of 13 failures pressing against her shoulders. The men watched, skepticism mixing with curiosity now. She was not checking equipment, was not consulting the computer, was not doing any of the things they had all done. She was just standing there, feeling the wind on her face, breathing, baying still in a way that none of them had managed despite all their training. 1 minute passed, then 2, then 5. Harper shifted his weight. Impatient, she's stalling. The pressure, she's hunting. Grace's voice carried an edge of controlled anger now. Wind doesn't communicate in data streams, Lieutenant. It speaks in whispers, patterns, rhythms. She's learning its dialect. 6 minutes, the men were getting restless now. This performance seeming more like theater than preparation. Then Kiera opened her eyes. She looked directly at Grace. A small nod, barely perceptible, a signal between them. Private language, built over 8 years of training together. Grace's weathered face showed the faintest smile. She had found it. The pattern, the secret the desert had been keeping from everyone else. Kiera moved to the rifle. Bare feet made no sound on the concrete platform. She settled behind the Macmillan T-50 with movements that looked more like meditation than military procedure. Her hands touched the weapon with something approaching reverence. The men watched, their skepticism now mixed with something else. Curiosity. Maybe even hope. 13 failures made them want to see success, even if it came from an unexpected source. Grace knelt beside her, her old knees protesting, but her presence necessary. Talk to me, Ghost. What is the desert telling you? His voice, when it came, was soft but absolutely certain. The voice of someone who had moved past guessing into knowing. Wind cycles every 51 seconds, Colonel. Gust peaks at the 7-second mark. Turbulence from 8 to 35 seconds. Stable settling from 43 to 51. Window duration, 7.4 seconds. Grace's eyes showed recognition. This was not memorized data. This was real-time environmental analysis at a level she had spent 4 decades trying to teach. Mirage refraction, Kiera continued. Heat, rising in columns every 28 seconds. From the basalt outcroppings at 900 meters, optical displacement. Current sun angle, 44 degrees western descent. Displacement calculates 14.2 inches leftward. But if I time bullet transit during thermal column, dissipation refraction minimizes to 2.8 inches. Grace sat back on her heels. Eyes showed pride and wonder mixed together. Ghost, that's PhD-level atmospheric analysis. Montana taught me, Colonel. 10,000 hours watching bullets arc across valleys, learning that textbook physics captures 80% of reality. The final 20% requires feeling it. Then Kiera said something that made Grace's breath catch. Colonel, I'm not shooting for center mass on the first shot. Silence, prompt, and absolute. Explain. I need empirical confirmation of wind behavior at target location. Flag data at 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 meters provides inference, not certainty. First shot impact will show actual wind vector at target zone. No sensor provides that data. First shot is reconnaissance. Grace understood immediately. You're going to intentionally miss to guarantee the second shot hits. Yes, Colonel. Whitmore had been listening. He stepped closer. Chief Blackwell, you're telling me. You intend to waste your first round on a deliberate miss. Kiera's eyes met his calm, professional. Absolutely certain, negative, sir. I'm eliminating guesswork through tactical reconnaissance. Every shooter today failed because they guessed about conditions at target location. I'm removing the guess, sir. But before Whitmore could respond, his radio crackled. He stepped away, listened. His face went pale. When he returned, he looked at Kiera with something approaching desperation. Chief Blackwell, I need to be very clear about something. He paused, wrestling with whether to say what came next. Pentagon was watching via satellite feed. If you miss, if your reconnaissance shot concept is seen as tactical failure, there will be consequences beyond this competition. Grace started to interrupt. Whitmore held up a hand. She deserves to know, Colonel. Admiral Richardson is building a case that the 2016 integration policy was premature. He's looking for evidence that women don't belong in Tier 1 sniper roles for biological reasons. Your shot, Chief Blackwell. Your success or failure. It's being used to make policy decisions that affect every woman who comes after you. The weight of that statement hung in the desert air, heavier than the heat, more oppressive than the sun. Kiera closed her eyes. For just a moment, When she opened them, her expression had not changed. Still, calm, still certain. Sir, with respect, that changes nothing. I'm still taking the reconnaissance shot. Because eliminating variables is more important than managing political optics. If they want to base policy on one shot in one competition, that's their failure of judgment. Not mine. She turned back to the rifle. I'm ready, sir. Whitmore looked at Grace. Grace looked at Kiera and made a decision that 40 years of service had prepared her for. Chief Blackwell has operational autonomy in method selection, Colonel. Let her shoot. Whitmore stepped back. Kiera settled into prone position. Her body became an organic extension of the earth beneath her. No separation between shooter and ground. Her breathing slowed, vital even from 20 feet away. Her heart rate dropping from resting to something approaching hibernation levels. Biofeedback control developed through years of meditation and practice. Schmidt and Bender scoped the target, wavered in the heat mirage like a desert phantom. But Kiera did not fight the shimmer. She observed it, mapped its rhythm, understood its pattern, became a student of optical distortion rather than its victim. She waited motionless, 15 seconds into the wind cycle. 25-35, Harper muttered. She's freezing. Choking under pressure, Grace's voice was barely controlled rage. Patience is a weapon you've never mastered. 44 seconds into the cycle. Turbulence settlings. 47, 40, 50. The perfect window opening. Kiera's finger began its final journey, pressure building with glacial slowness. 4 pounds, 4.5, 5, 5.5, 6 pounds. The trigger broke. The massive 50 caliber round erupted from the barrel at 920 feet per second, creating a supersonic shockwave visible in the mirage distortion. The sound echoed across the desert, rolling through canyons, bouncing off distant rock walls. 7.9 seconds of flight time began. Through spotting scopes, 13 sets of eyes tracked the bullet's path, watched the faint trace cutting through superheated air, saw it arc. Drop, drift, impact. Dust cloud erupted 17 inches left of target center. Miss. But God, what a miss. Closer than all but one of the previous attempts. Dramatically, impossibly closer than most. But Kiera's eyes never left the scope. She was not disappointed. She was analyzing. The dust cloud had revealed everything she needed to know. Wind at target location. 4.2 miles per hour, stronger than the 3,000-meter flag indicated. Mirage refraction, 10.8 inches, not 14.2. She had overcompensated. Bullet drop trajectory perfect. Elevation calculation flawless. Coriolis compensation accurate. She performed instantaneous mental recalculation. Did not touch the scope turrets. Pure Kentucky windage adjustment, exactly as Grace had taught her a decade ago. Turrets are mechanical. Brain is computational. Trust brain over tools when data updates mid-mission. Lieutenant Harper laughed, the sound harsh in the desert air. There it is. Even she admits defeat. If the so-called best female sniper cannot, Grace turned it on him with fury that made the younger man actually step backward. Lieutenant, that woman just accomplished more with one deliberate shot than you did with 2 desperate attempts. She gathered actionable intelligence. Watch what she does with it before you embarrass yourself further. Kiera was already reloading. 1 round remaining, 1 opportunity. 1 chance to do what 13 of the finest military snipers in America could not. The wind blew across the desert, carrying secrets in its breath. The sun beat down mercilessly. The target sat 4,000 meters away, small and distant and impossible. But Kiera Blackwell, barefoot on burning sand, her hands steady on a rifle that weighed nearly as much as she did, her mind calculating with precision that transcended mathematics. She knew the desert had shown her what she needed to see. Now came the moment when knowledge became action, when impossible became inevitable. 13 failures would be answered by 1 perfect shot, or by 1 more defeat that would prove the skeptics right. Either way, the next 7.9 seconds would define everything. Kiera Blackwell's hands moved with practiced economy, loading the second round into the chamber, with movements so smooth they seemed rehearsed 1,000 times, because they had been. 12,000 times across training ranges, in combat zones, in mountains and deserts, in places where the line between practice and survival blurred into nothing. One cartridge remained. 750 grains of copper-jacketed lead, waiting to fly faster than sound, to fight wind and gravity and the rotation of the earth itself. One chance to prove that the first shot had not been failure but foundation. One opportunity to transform doubt into certainty. The mental recalculation had already occurred in the seconds after her reconnaissance shot's impact. Numbers that would have required computer assistance for anyone else flowed through her mind like water, finding its level, windage compensation. Add 4.2 miles per hour to account for target location differential. 8.3 inches additional right hold. Mirage refraction reduced from 14.2 inches to 10.8. 3.4 inches less left compensations needed. Coriolis drift. Maintain the 39.7-inch right drift calculation. First shot had proven it accurate. Elevation perfect on the reconnaissance shot. No change required. Combined adjustment. Aim point now, 19.7 inches right of center. 1.8 inches high. The numbers settled into her consciousness, not as abstract mathematics, but as physical reality. She could see the bullet's path before it happened, visualize the arc and drift and drop as clearly as if the trajectory had already been drawn in the air with luminescent paint. Grace Thornton knelt beside her for the final time. Her weathered knees protesting against concrete heated to over 130 degrees by the merciless Arizona sun. The pain did not show on her face. 40 years of military service had taught her that some discomforts were simply the price of being present for moments that mattered. You confident in your data, Ghost? Kiera's eyes never left the scope as she answered, voice composed, but carrying absolute certainty. Affirmative, Colonel. The desert showed me what I needed to see. Then trust yourself. Trust your Montana training. Trust 10,000 hours of wind reading. Trust the warrior I've watched you become. Kiera nodded once, a gesture so small it barely qualified as movement. But Grace understood. They had developed this private language over 8 years of working together. A vocabulary of glances and nods that communicated more than words ever could. Grace stood slowly, joints complaining, and stepped back to give her space. But she did not walk away, did not join the other observers. She stayed close enough to hear Kiera breathing, close enough to see the micro-adjustments in her position, close enough to be part of this moment that she knew would define not just Kiera's career, but her own legacy as an instructor. Kiera settled deeper into prone position. Her body became something more than human anatomy, transforming into a biological machine optimized for a single purpose. Her breathing cycle initiated 4 deep breaths to oxygenate blood, to settle her nervous system, to transition from normal human physiology into something approaching suspended animation. Then the combat breathing pattern Grace had drilled into her until it became as automatic as heartbeat. Inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 2, exhale for 6. The extended exhale triggered the parasympathetic nervous system, lowering heart rate, steadying tremors, creating the internal stillness required for precision at this distance. Through the scope, the world contracted to a circle of magnified reality. The target wavered in the heat mirage, appearing to float and shift like something seen through troubled water. But Kiera had learned long ago not to fight the distortion. Instead, she incorporated it into her calculations, understanding that the shimmer followed patterns as predictable as tides. If you watched long enough to learn its rhythm, she was waiting for the wind cycle, counting seconds in her head with the precision of an atomic clock. 10 seconds since the last gust peak, 20 seconds, 30. Behind her, the 13 failed shooters watched through spotting scopes and binoculars, their earlier skepticism beginning to transform into something else: curiosity, respect, maybe even hope that anyone could succeed where they had all failed. Lieutenant Cole Harper stood apart from the others, arms crossed, jaw clenched. He had talked the loudest and failed the hardest. Now he watched this quiet woman prepare for a shot with methods that seemed more mystical than military. Part of him wanted her to fail, to prove his assumptions correct, to validate the worldview he had built even with 15 years of combat. But another part, the part that had survived 4 tours, by recognizing competence when he saw it, whispered that he was about to witness something he had never seen before. Colonel Whitmore checked his watch without really seeing the 2 hours and 17 minutes since the competition began. 26 rounds fired, 56 failures. The heat had climbed even higher if such a thing were possible. The wind had grown more erratic, gusting now to 27 miles per hour before dying to 15, creating chaos in the air that made precision shooting feel like throwing dice in a hurricane. But Kiera seemed unaffected by the deteriorating conditions. She existed in a state of focus so complete it appeared transcendent, as if she had left normal consciousness behind and entered some other realm where only the shot existed. 40 seconds into the wind cycle, the gust had peaked 7 seconds in, exactly as she had predicted, turbulence from 8 to 35 seconds. Exactly as modeled, now the settling phase, when the chaotic air smoothed itself into something approaching predictability. 44 seconds. Her finger rested on the trigger with pressure so light it barely registered. Grace had taught her that the perfect trigger pull should surprise the shooter. That conscious decision to fire introduced tension that degraded accuracy. The trigger should break like glass under steady pressure, the shot happening almost without volition. 47 seconds. Through the mirage, the target appeared to dance and shimmer. But Kiera's eyes tracked not the target itself, but the heat signatures around it. Understanding that where the target appeared to be and where it actually existed were two different things, separated by inches that meant everything. 49 seconds. Perfect stillness settling over the desert. Even the sound of wind seemed to pause, as if the landscape itself held its breath. 50 seconds. The optimal window opening. 7.4 seconds of relative atmospheric stability before the cycle reset and chaos resumed. Then something changed. An unexpected gust hit at 46 seconds into what should have been the stable phase. 5 seconds early, an anomaly that violated the pattern she had observed for 95 minutes. A lesser shooter would have panicked, aborted, started the cycle over, hoping the pattern would reassert itself. Kiera just, real-time recalculation flowing through her mind faster than conscious thought could track. Early gust meant the next cycle was beginning 5 seconds ahead of schedule. Course shifted but remained predictable. New stable window would occur from 46 to 53 seconds from current timestamp. Her finger pressure on the trigger relaxed infinitesimally, waiting, patience transforming from virtue into weapon. Grace watched her trigger discipline with something approaching wonder. In 4 decades of training snipers, teaching them to control breathing and heartbeat, and the tiny muscular tremors that turned perfect shots into near misses, she had never witnessed this level of adaptive control. Kiera was not following a checklist or executing a procedure. She was dancing with the environment, responding to its changes with the fluid grace of a musician improvising within a familiar melody. 3 seconds since the anomaly gust. 7 seconds. 10. The wind settled again. Finding its new rhythm, the pattern had shifted but not broken, order emerging from chaos like stars appearing as the sun set. 15 seconds since the cycle reset. Her breathing had slowed to something barely perceptible. 3 breaths per minute. Heart rate down to 41 beats per minute, visible in the steady pulse at her throat. Her body had become a platform of biological stability, compensating for tremors and movements too small for conscious control, but large enough to matter at 4,000 meters. 20 seconds. The crosshairs settled on her calculated aim point, 19.7 inches right of center, 1.8 inches high, a location that looked absurdly wrong, that violated every instinct, screaming at the target itself. But she had learned long ago that at extreme distances, you did not aim at where things were. You aimed at where they would be when physics finished its work. 25 seconds. Micro adjustments ceased. The rifle stopped moving entirely, locked in position by muscle memory and controlled breathing and absolute certainty. 30 seconds. Through the scope, she could see individual variations in the steel target plate, slight discoloration where other bullets had impacted over years of competitions, scratches and dents that told stories of near misses and direct hits from previous challenges. The metal appeared to shimmer in the heat, but she had learned to see through the distortion to the solid reality beneath. 35 seconds. Her world had narrowed to three elements: the crosshairs, the aim point, the space between them that would determine success or failure. 40 seconds. Breath control reaching the critical moment. Half exhale, then respiratory pause. The moment between breaths, when the body achieved maximum stillness, when even the inflation of lungs could not disturb the rifle's position. 44 seconds. The optimal window opening for the second time. 7.4 seconds of relative stability in an atmosphere of chaos. Her trigger finger began its final journey, pressure building with glacial slowness. 4 pounds. 4.5. The world seemed to slow down, time itself becoming elastic and stretched. She was aware of everything simultaneously. The heat radiating from sand beneath her body, the weight of the rifle against her shoulder, Grace's breathing behind her, controlled and steady, the tension radiating from 13 observers who had become invested in this shot despite themselves, the wind's whisper across her bare neck, the sun's pressure on her back. 5 pounds. 5.5. And in her mind she saw the bullet's path before it happened. Visualize the trajectory as clearly as if she were watching slow-motion footage of something that had already occurred. Saw the round exit the barrel, stabilizing as the rifling imparted spin, saw it arc upward against gravity, climbing nearly 8 feet above line of sight before beginning its descent. Saw it drift right as the Coriolis effect and wind combined to push it laterally. Saw it slow as air resistance bled velocity. Saw it drop as gravity exerted its inexorable pull. Saw it impact exactly where she knew it would. 6 pounds. The trigger broke. The rifle roared to life. Thunder born from human intention rather than atmospheric conditions. The massive 50 caliber round erupted from the barrel at 2,920 feet per second, creating a pressure wave that rippled the mirage and sent a small cloud of dust billowing from the muzzle brake. The recoil slammed into Kiera's shoulder with force that would have bruised lesser shooters, but her body absorbed it like a shock absorber designed specifically for this purpose. Years of training having taught her muscles exactly how to distribute the impact, how to let the rifle move against her rather than fighting it, how to maintain scope picture even as physics tried to throw her off target. And then the waiting began. 7.9 seconds. 1 second of flight. The round was still climbing, fighting gravity's pull, traveling at velocities that made it more missile than projectile. The copper jacket maintained integrity despite forces trying to tear it apart. Boat tail design provided stability, even as air resistance attempted to tumble it end over end. At 2 seconds, it reached the apex of its arc, nearly 8 feet above the line of sight between barrel and target. For a fraction of a moment, it hung suspended at the top of its parabolda, velocity still bleeding away, but trajectory still true. At 3 seconds, gravity began winning its war. The bullet started its descent, dropping faster now. As velocity decreased and air resistance compounded the gravitational pull, the Earth continued rotating beneath it, invisible but inexorable, pushing the round rightward through space. At 4 seconds, the bullet crossed the 2,000-meter mark, passing through air masses of different temperatures and densities. Wind that measured 15 miles per hour at ground level transformed into 22 at altitude, creating lateral forces that would have been catastrophic if Kiera had not accounted for them. At 5 seconds, velocity had bled from 2,900 feet per second to approximately 1,500. The decreased speed meant increased susceptibility to wind, to gravity, to every force that conspired against accuracy. But the shot had been calculated for this degradation, accounting for nonlinearly velocity loss that most ballistic computers simplified into straight-line assumptions. At 6 seconds, the bullet dropped through the thermal column, rising from basalt outcroppings at 1,900 meters. The heated air created a density change that bent the bullet's path microscopically. Would have introduced error measured in feet if the shot had been timed differently. But Kiera had fired during the dissipation phase, when the column was collapsing, minimizing the optical and physical distortion. At 7 seconds, the round had dropped over 400 feet from its initial trajectory, was now traveling at approximately 1,200 feet per second, had drifted 39.7 inches right due to Coriolis effect, had been pushed an additional 8.3 inches right by wind differential between firing position and target location. At 7.9 seconds, copper-jacketed lead, traveling at 1,180 feet per second, having fought wind and gravity and planetary rotation across 4,000 meters of hostile atmosphere, arrived at a point in space 19.7 inches right and 1.8 inches high of where a man aiming directly at the target would have placed his crosshairs, which meant it arrived exactly at target center, clong. The sound of copper-jacketed lead striking hardened steel rang across the desert clear, pure, unmistakable, a tone that cut through wind and distance and disbelief with the clarity of absolute truth. Through 13 spotting scopes, 13 combat veterans saw the same image simultaneously. Impact, dead center, perfect hit. For 3 seconds, absolute silence ruled the desert. Not even the wind dared make sound. Then chaos erupted. Men leaped to their feet, scopes dropping from hands, voices rising in disbelief and amazement, and the raw excitement that came from witnessing something that should not have been possible. She did it. Holy God, she actually did it. Dead center. I saw it. Perfect hit. That's impossible. That's literally impossible. No one makes that shot. The Delta operator who had come closest stood with his mouth open, staring at the target through his scope, as if expecting the impact to disappear, to reveal itself as hallucination born from heat and hope. But the mark remained, perfect, undeniable. Marine, who had shot for 30 years, across 3 wars, lowered his binoculars with hands that trembled slightly, not from age, but from the recognition that he had just witnessed the redefinition of what he thought possible. The SEAL Team 6 operator, whose name was classified, but whose reputation was not simply whispered. That was art disguised as science. Lieutenant Cole Harper stood frozen, his face drained of color, his spotting scope still locked on the target as if he could not quite believe what he had seen. His mouth opened and closed without sound, words failing him for perhaps the first time in his adult life. The worldview he had constructed over 15 years of combat, the assumptions he had built about capability and limitation and the natural order of things, crumbled like a sandcastle hit by a wave. Colonel Whitmore lowered his binoculars slowly. His expression transformed from professional observation into wonder. In 42 years of military service, he had seen remarkable shooting. He had witnessed legendary marksmen make shots that defied odds, that seemed to bend the laws of physics through pure skill and determination. But this was something else entirely. Grace Thornton did not move, did not celebrate. She simply watched Kiera, who remained in prone position, calmly clearing her rifle with the mechanical precision of someone performing a routine task, as if she had just completed a standard qualification exercise, instead of accomplishing something only a handful of people on Earth could claim. Her face showed no triumph, no excitement, just the understated satisfaction of someone who had known the outcome before the trigger broke, who had seen the future and simply waited for reality to catch up. Kiera engaged the rifle safety, removed the magazine, locked the bolt back to verify the chamber was clear. Each movement deliberate and proper, following protocols drilled into her through thousands of hours of training. Only then did she stand, her bare feet having spent nearly 15 minutes on concrete and sand hot enough to blister skin. She showed no discomfort as she slipped her boots back on, lacing them with the same careful attention she gave everything else. Grace walked to her slowly, giving her space, respecting the moment. When she reached her, she extended her weathered hand, Kiera took it, and they shook once, firmly, the simple gesture carrying more meaning than any speech could convey. Chief Blackwell. Grace's voice was rough with emotion she did not bother hiding. In 47 years of military service, 4 decades training snipers, working with Marine Scout snipers, and SEAL teams and Delta operators, and every elite unit this country has, she paused, making sure every man on that range heard her next words. I have never witnessed marksmanship of this caliber. You did not just make an impossible shot. You made it appear inevitable. Kiera's response was characteristic, understated, humble completely without ego. Wasn't inevitable, Colonel. Just necessary. Montana taught me to listen. You taught me to refine what I heard. Afghanistan taught me to trust it. The desert confirmed it. The other shooters had gathered closer now, the initial shock giving way to professional respect. These were men who understood exactly how difficult what they had just witnessed had been. They had each attempted the same shot with the same equipment under the same conditions. They knew the margins for error, the countless variables, the sheer audacity of attempting something at the edge of human capability. And they had all failed where she had succeeded. The Marine Scout sniper, gray-haired and veteran at 52, spoke first. His voice carried the weight of 3 decades of experience. Ma'am, I've been shooting for 30 years. Combat in 3 different wars. I thought I understood wind reading. But what you just did, the way you waited for the pattern, adjusted for the anomaly gust, that was something I've never seen. The SEAL Team 6 operator, whose name was classified, but whose reputation was not, nodded slowly. The reconnaissance shot, using the first round to gather target location data. That's tactical genius. Why didn't any of us think of that? Kiera answered simply, without condescension, because you were trying to succeed on the first shot. I accepted that learning was more valuable than guessing. 2 shots with better information beats 2 shots with the same incomplete data. Colonel Whitmore approached, his earlier skepticism completely absent, replaced by contrition mixed with respect. Chief Blackwell, I owe you an apology. A profound one. His voice carried the formality of someone making an official statement, but underneath was genuine emotion. I harbored reservations about women in Tier 1 sniper roles, questioned whether physical differences would create capability gaps. He paused, choosing his words carefully. You did not merely belong in this competition. You dominated it. You achieved what 13 world-class operators could not accomplish. You have proven that capability transcends gender. That skill is measured in performance, not assumptions. Kiera met his eyes directly, her gaze steady and professional. Sir, with respect, they are exceptional shooters. Each possesses capabilities I lack in specific domains. I had situational advantages. Childhood developing wind-reading intuition in Montana wilderness. They have different advantages. Urban combat experience I'm still learning. Mechanical aptitude with equipment I don't match. Tactical innovations I study. She gestured to encompass the other shooters. This wasn't about validating gender in combat roles, sir. This was about matching the right skill set to the right challenge. Today's conditions favored my particular strengths. Tomorrow's challenges might favor theirs. That's why we train diverse capabilities across the force. The professionalism of her response, the complete absence of triumph or ego, did more to earn respect than the shot itself had. Lieutenant Harper stepped forward, and every eye turned to him. He had been the loudest skeptic, the harshest critic. What he said now would matter. His face showed the struggle between pride and integrity. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then something shifted in his expression. The arrogance drained away, replaced by humility. Chief Blackwell. His voice was steady but carried the weight of admission. I was disrespectful, dismissive. Wrong. He met her eyes, and the effort it took was visible. You demonstrated mastery that humbles me. I have 94 confirmed combat missions, and I could not make that shot. You're operating at a level I didn't know existed. He paused, then continued with obvious difficulty, but complete sincerity. I was wrong about you, about what I thought defined capability. You're not just a good shooter. You're one of the finest I've ever seen. And I need to learn from that instead of resenting it. Kiera extended her hand. Harper took it. Lieutenant, you'll make shots I cannot. We all have strengths. The key is recognizing them in ourselves and others. Then she smiled, small and brief but genuine. Besides, your doubt made me want to prove you wrong. So thank you for the motivation. Surprised laughter rippled through the group, breaking the tension like a blade-cutting rope. Even Harper managed a rueful smile that came from recognizing your own foolishness and choosing to learn from it rather than defend it. Grace watched this exchange with satisfaction that went bone deep. This was what she had tried to teach for 40 years. Not just how to shoot, but how to be a warrior, how to win with grace, how to teach through example, how to transform skeptics into allies through competence and character. Colonel Whitmore checked his watch, then raised his voice to address the entire group. This concludes the Impossible Shot Challenge. I think we can all agree that impossible is simply another word for not yet accomplished. He turned to Kiera. His expression serious. Chief Blackwell, your performance today has implications beyond competition. Naval Special Warfare Command has been observing remotely via satellite feed. They have requested direct communication with you. He held out a satellite phone. Kiera took it, stepped a few paces away for privacy, listened more than she spoke. The conversation lasted 3 minutes. When she returned and handed the phone back to Whitmore, her expression revealed nothing. Well, Grace asked. Kiera looked at her, at the assembled shooters. Then back at Grace. They want me at Naval Special Warfare Center, Advanced Sniper Course, Lead Instructor Cadre, develop curriculum integrating observation-based methodology, traditional ballistics, silence. Then Grace's slow smile, the expression crinking the weathered skin around her eyes. Time to pass the torch, Ghost. Mastered what took me 40 years to learn halfway. Now teach it. Build a legacy that outlives us both. Kiera looked at this woman who had been mentor and teacher, and the closest thing to a second mother she had known since her own mother died when she was 6. What about you, Colonel? You retiring for real this time? Hell no. Grace's grin widened. I'll come teach with you. Not as lead, as your assistant. Senior advisor, they said. Let me learn from you for a change. See what you can teach an old woman who thought she knew everything. But even as Grace spoke those words, even as Kiera felt something like joy beginning to bloom in her chest, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered a question, a concern that would not quite take shape yet. Something about the phone call, about what NW's command had not said, about the careful way they had phrased the offer. She pushed it aside. This was a moment for celebration, for honoring what had been accomplished. The questions could wait. Except they could not wait, because 6 months later, when Kiera reported to Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, California, she walked into the Advanced Sniper Course, expecting to begin building the future Grace had envisioned. She discovered that the torch being passed was being ripped from someone else's hands. Moose, Naval Amphibious Coronado, California, February 2025. The Pacific Ocean met the California shoreline in eternal condensation half a mile from where Kiera Blackwell stood in the hallway of Building 317. Sunlight streamed through windows that overlooked training facilities where generations of SEALs had been forged, palm trees in salt-laden wind. Seagulls circled above obstacle courses and firing ranges. The outside, nothing suggested the lethal expertise being cultivated within these walls. No signs, no markers, just concrete and steel, and the deliberate anonymity that characterized all truly serious military training. Kiera had arrived 30 minutes early, first-day nerves disguised as punctuality. She wore her service khakis, pressed to knife-edge precision, the Navy Achievement Medal and Combat Action Ribbon, among others, displayed above her left breast pocket. The SEAL trident on her chest caught morning light like a challenge or a target. She was not sure which. The door at the end of the hallway bore a simple placard, Senior Instructor Drake. Kiera knocked. Twice, firm but not aggressive. Enter. From one side was female, clip professional. a core, opened the door and stepped into an office that looked like it had been occupied by the same person for 2 decades. Photos on the walls showed the evolution of naval special warfare from the 1990s forward. Bud SH, classes graduating in formations where not a single woman stood among the ranks, training evolutions in jungles and deserts. Commendation certificates arranged with military precision. Behind a desk that had seen better years sat Senior Instructor Eleanor Drake, 58 years old, 26 years in Naval Special Warfare, 14 years teaching at this facility. Her hair was cut short, more gray than brown now. Her face showed the weathered quality of someone who had spent decades in sun and wind and salt spray. Her eyes were sharp, assessing, and absolutely furious. Chief Blackwell, Drake did not extend a hand. You're early. Yes, ma'am. Wanted to orient myself before the official start time. Punctuality. How commendable. The words carried acid beneath professional courtesy. Kiera stood at attention, uncertain what she had walked into. Ma'am, I'm looking forward to working with you. Colonel Thornton spoke highly of your... Let's dispense with the pleasantries, Chief. Drake stood now, slowly, like someone whose body protested movement it used to handle easily. Do you know why you're here? Ma'am, to develop advanced curriculum integrating observation-based. No, you're here to replace me. The words hung in the air like gunsmoke. Kiera blinked. Ma'am, I don't understand. My orders say co-director of. Your orders are a lie designed to make this easier to swallow. Drake moved around her desk, leaned against it, arms crossed. 3 weeks ago, NSW Command informed me I was being transitioned to early retirement. Effective March 31st, they called it modernization, organizational restructuring. Bringing in fresh perspectives. She laughed, bitter and sharp. Fresh perspectives. That's what they call it when they replace a 58-year-old woman with a 29-year-old one. Kiera felt her stomach drop. Ma'am, I was told this was a co-director position. That you were told what you needed to hear to accept the job. Drake's voice was not loud, just devastatingly calm. And I'm sure you went into that phone call thinking you were being offered an addition to the program, not a replacement, because that's how they operate. They pit women against each other instead of fighting the system that's trying to push us both out. This isn't. I didn't ask for this, I know you didn't. Drake's expression softened microscopically, which is why I'm not angry at you, Chief Blackwell. I'm angry at the institution, but you're the one standing in my office, so you're the one I'm talking to. Kiera stood silent for a long moment, processing. Then she made a decision. I'll refuse the position. Tell them I won't take it unless you stay as co-director. Equal rank, equal authority. Drake studied her. You'd sacrifice your career advancement for a woman you just met? Yes, ma'am. Why? Because every time they replace an older woman with a younger one, instead of adding both, we all lose. The institution loses institutional knowledge. The younger generations loses mentorship. Women as a whole lose credibility because we let ourselves be used against each other. For the first time since Kiera entered the office, Drake's expression cracked. Not much, just a flicker of something that might have been respect or hope. You understand they'll fight you on this? Yes, ma'am. You might lose the position entirely, then I lose it. Some things matter more than career advancement. Drake pushed off the desk, walked to the window, looked out at the Pacific for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. I've been doing this for 26 years, Chief. Longer than you've been alive. I've trained over 1,500 snipers. 63 of them are still active in Tier 1 units. 7 have become instructors themselves. She turned back to face Kiera, and NSW Command decided that's not valuable enough to keep. That at 58 I'm outdated, too old, not modern enough for the new military they're building. That's ageism, ma'am. Of course it is. But they don't call it that. They call it optimization. They show charts about cognitive decline and physical degradation, and the need for instructors who can demonstrate techniques themselves rather than just teach them. Drake's laugh was hollow, as if shooting is about physical strength, as if wisdom counts for nothing, as if the ability to mentor matters less than the ability to run an obstacle course. Kiera felt anger building in her chest, not at Drake, at the system that had created this situation. How many other women have they pushed out? 7 in the past 18 months. Drake walked to a file cabinet, pulled out a folder, handed it to Kiera, all between the ages of 51 and 62, all with decades of experience, all quietly retired under the Modernization Initiative. Kiera opened the folder, read the names most she recognized, legends in their fields, women who had paved the roads that made Kiera's own career possible. And they were being erased systematically under language designed to sound neutral but accomplish elimination. This is discrimination, yes, but they're careful. They retire at the same too, just not at the same rate. And the men they retire are truly at mandatory retirement age or failing physical standards. The women they're pushing out are in their prime, still capable, still contributing, just not fitting whatever image they've decided represents the future. Kiera closed the folder, made a decision. Ma'am, I'm calling SW Command right now. I'm refusing this position unless they reinstate you as full co-director. Equal authority, equal tenure protection. They won't agree, then they don't get me. Drake studied her for a long moment. You really mean that? Yes, ma'am. You'd walk away from the opportunity to shape the future of sniper training in the U.S. military. An opportunity built on pushing you out isn't an opportunity worth taking. Drake nodded slowly. Then she did something Kiera did not expect. She smiled, small but genuine. Colonel Thornton told me you were different, said you understood things most people your age don't. I thought she was being sentimental. Seeing what she wanted to see in her protege, she extended her hand. I was wrong. Let's make this call together. If we're going down, we go down fighting. Kiera took her hand, shook it firmly. We're not going down, ma'am. We're going to win. Because they need what I can do. And what I can do requires what you know. They're not getting one without the other. Drake's smile widened. You know what, Chief Blackwell? I think I'm going to enjoy working with you after all. The phone call to NSW's command lasted 47 minutes. It did not go well. Captain Morris, from personnel, spoke in the measured tones of someone reading from talking points. Chief Blackwell, we appreciate your team-oriented mindset. However, Senior Instructor Drake's transition has already been finalized. The organizational structure for the Advanced Sniper Course moving forward is unacceptable. Kiera kept her voice professional but firm. Sir, with respect, I will not accept this position unless Instructor Drake is retained as full co-director with equal authority and tenure protection. Non-negotiable. Silence on the other end. Then Captain Morris's voice. Tighter now. Chief, I don't think you understand the opportunity you're being offered. This is a career-defining position. Need curriculum development for the most elite sniper training in the world. You'd be throwing that over principle, sir. And institutional knowledge. Instructor Drake has 26 years of experience I don't have. 14 years teaching at this facility. I need what she knows. The program needs what she knows. Replacing her with me isn't optimization. It's institutional amnesia. Drake stood beside Kiera listening on speakerphone, her expression unreadable. Another voice joined the call. Commander Elizabeth Hayes, Director of Special Warfare Training. Chief Blackwell, this is Commander Hayes. I want you to understand something. The decision to transition Senior Instructor Drake was not made lightly. It was based on comprehensive review of program effectiveness, instructor evaluations, and strategic planning for the next decade of special operations training. Ma'am, was age a factor in that comprehensive review? Pause. That's an inflammatory question, Chief. It's a simple yes or no question, ma'am. Age is always a factor in personnel decisions. You need instructors who can serve for the long term, who can physically demonstrate techniques, Instructor Drake can do all of those things, ma'am. And she can do things I cannot, namely teach based on 26 years of watching techniques succeed and fail in actual combat across multiple generations of warfare. That's not something you can replace with youth or physical capability. Kiera took a breath, chose her next words carefully. Ma'am, I made a 4,000-meter shot at Yuma. I know you watched via satellite. I know that shot is why I'm being offered this position. But do you know why I made that shot when 13 elite male shooters failed? Enlighten me, Chief. Because my grandmother taught me to read wind when I was 8 years old. Colonel Grace Thornton refined that intuition into methodology over 8 years of training. I'm 29, ma'am. I have exactly 0 years of teaching experience. Without mentorship from women who came before me, older women who knew things I didn't. I'm just a good shooter. Not a good teacher, she paused, letting that sink in. You want me to build the future of sniper training? Fine. But you don't build the future by cutting yourself off from the past. You build it by integrating what works from both. Instructor Drake is the past that makes my future possible. You're not getting one without the other. Silence stretched across the phone line, 30 seconds. A minute. Finally, Commander Hayes spoke. Chief Blackwell, I'll need to consult with the Admiral. This changes the operational structure significantly. Take all the time you need, ma'am. I'm not going anywhere. That may be more literal than you intend, Chief. If we cannot accommodate this request, you understand you'll be forfeiting the position entirely. I understand, ma'am. Very well. Stand by for further communication. The line went dead. Kiera set down the phone, looked at Drake. Well, I guess we wait. Drake was quiet for a moment. Then she laughed. Real and genuine, 26 years in this institution. And I've never seen anyone tell a commander they won't take a promotion unless the person they're replacing gets to keep their job. You're either the bravest person I've met or the most foolish. Can it be both? Probably is. Drake moved to her desk, pulled out 2 mugs and a coffee pot that looked like it had survived multiple wars. We might as well caffeinate while we wait for them to decide our fate. She poured 2 cups, handed one to Kiera. Tell me about Yuma, not the shot, the preparation. What you were thinking during those 6 minutes of observation. And so Kiera told her not about ballistics or calculations, but about her grandmother Maggie. About learning to track mule deer across Montana rangeland by reading how wind moved through grass. About her father Thomas, teaching her that patience was not passive waiting, but active selection of the perfect moment. About Colonel Grace Thornton, taking those instincts and teaching her to apply them to combat. Drake listened, not just heard. Listened with the focused attention of someone who understood that teaching was not about transferring information, but about understanding how students think. Your grandmother, Drake said when Kiera finished. Is she still living? Yes, ma'am. 82 now. In a memory care facility in Montana. Alzheimer's, I'm sorry. Thank you, ma'am. She has good days and bad days. On the good days, she remembers everything. On the bad days, she thinks my father is still alive. Thinks I'm still 8 years old, Drake nodded slowly. My mother has Alzheimer's too. 85. It's a cruel disease. Takes the person away, piece by piece, while leaving their body behind. They sat in silence for a moment. 2 women separated by 30 years, united by shared loss and shared fight, and the understanding that sometimes the battles that matter most are the ones fought in administrative offices rather than on battlefields. The phone rang. Both women tensed. Drake answered. Listened. Her face showed nothing. Understood, sir. Yes, sir. We'll be ready. She hung up, looked at Kiera, and smiled. Congratulations, Co-Director Blackwell. Looks like we're in this together after all. Belief flooded through Kiera. Like a wave they agreed. Equal rank, equal authority, shared curriculum development. They're calling it an intergenerational knowledge transfer pilot program, which is bureaucratic speak for we're scared you'll go public about age discrimination. So we're covering our asses. Drake's smile widened, but I'll take it. A win is a win. Kiera set down her coffee, extended her hand again. Then let's build something worth building, ma'am. Drake took it. Call me Ellie, Chief. We're equals now. Might as well act like it. Only if you call me Kiera. Deal. They shook. And in that moment, in that simple gesture of mutual respect, a partnership was born that would change not just sniper training, but the way the entire military thought about age and wisdom, and the value of women who refused to be erased quietly. But first, they had to teach a class of 28 students who had no idea that the 2 women standing before them had just fought a war to be there and won. 12 months can feel like a lifetime when you're building something that matters, or 12 seconds when you realize it's already changing the world. June 2026, 16 months after Kiera Blackwell made a shot that should have been impossible. 14 months after she refused a promotion that required erasing a woman who deserved better. 6 months after a documentary crew from the military channel finished filming what they thought would be a standard training program feature. And discovered instead a story about 3 generations of women teaching warriors that strength looked different than anyone expected. The documentary was called The Science of Silence. It aired on a Tuesday evening in June. Prime time for military programming. Expected audience maybe 500,000 viewers. Specialized content that would trend within veteran communities for a few days, then fade into the archives. Except it did not fade. Within 72 hours, the documentary had been viewed 4 million times across streaming platforms and social media shares. Comment sections exploded, not with the usual arguments about military policy or political correctness, but with something else entirely. Men in their 60s and 70s saying things like, "This is what we needed 40 years ago." Women in their 50s and 60s saying, "Finally someone sees us." Active duty personnel saying, "This changed how I think about everything." The documentary had done something unexpected. It had made patience look powerful, made observation look aggressive, made quiet competence look more dangerous than loud confidence. And it had shown 3 generations of women teaching together. Eleanor Drake at 58, 2 decades of institutional knowledge. Kiera Blackwell at 29, innovation built on tradition. Students like Bryn Holloway at 24. The future learning from both. But the documentary was just the visible part, the part people could see and share and comment on beneath that surface. Places where policy got written and careers got shaped and the future got decided. Other changes were happening. Naval Special Warfare Command Headquarters, Coronado, California. Admiral James Richardson sat in his office reviewing quarterly reports. 59 years old, 37 years in the Navy. A man who believed in tradition and order and the way things had always been done. He did not like the Blackwell-Drake program, had not liked it from the beginning, thought it was politically motivated nonsense designed to appease critics who did not understand military realities. But he could not argue with numbers. And the numbers were undeniable. Advanced sniper course completion rate under the new integrated curriculum, up 23% from previous 3-year average. First-round hit probability in variable conditions, up 41%. Student evaluation scores, up 31%. And perhaps most damning to his objections, female applicant quality had increased dramatically, not just quantity, though applications from women had surged 340%. But quality. Women who had previously gone to other military occupational specialties were now specifically requesting sniper training because they had seen 3 women teaching at the highest level, had seen that excellence did not require pretending to be something you were not. Admiral Richardson set down the reports, rubbed his temples. He had been building a case to shut down the program, to prove that the Blackwell-Drake intergenerational knowledge transfer pilot was feel-good nonsense that would not survive contact with operational reality. He had been waiting for failure, for students trained in their methods to wash out in combat, for the data to prove what he already believed, that some biological realities could not be overcome by good intentions. Except the opposite had happened. Combat validations from students trained in the Blackwell-Drake methodology were coming back. And they were extraordinary. But before the documentary even aired, validation was already coming from the field, Syria. February 2026, 4 months before the documentary premiered, Lieutenant Cole Harper crouched on a rooftop in a city whose name would never appear in official reports. SEAL Team 7, Overwatch position. 8 Marines pinned down by enemy fire 300 meters north. The enemy commander was directing the ambush from a building 2,650 meters away. Extreme range even in ideal conditions. These were not ideal conditions. Wind gusting between 12 and 26 miles per hour. Temperature fluctuating. As clouds moved across the sun, dust in the air from artillery strikes 2 kilometers west. Harper had 2 shots. Maybe 3 minutes before the enemy commander relocated. 8 Marines, whose lives depended on whether he could make a shot that 18 months ago he would have attempted immediately. Rushed, confident in his calculations and equipment, trusting his 94 confirmed combat missions to carry him through. But 18 months ago, he had not met Kiera Blackwell, had not watched her spend 6 minutes observing before shooting, had not learned that patience was not weakness. That waiting was not hesitation. That understanding mattered more than speed. Harper closed his eyes, listened, not to the radio chatter from the Marines calling for help, not to his spotter urging him to take the shot, but to the wind, to the rhythm of it, to the pattern that existed if you were willing to wait long enough to see it. 47 seconds. That was the cycle. Gust peak at 9 seconds. Turbulence until 32. Stable window from 40 to 47. He could feel it now the way Kiera had described feeling it. Not as abstract data, but as physical reality. As something that spoke if you learned its language. First shot, deliberate miss. 2 feet left of target. Reconnaissance, gathering data about wind at target location that no computer could provide. His spotter nearly screamed, "Harper, you just wasted a round." Marines are dying. Trust me, 2 words, said with certainty. Harper had not possessed 18 months ago, certainty that came from knowing rather than guessing. Second shot, adjusted for the information the first round had provided, waited for the stable window. 41 seconds into the cycle, trigger break, 2,650 meters of flight time. The enemy commander dropped. The ambush collapsed. 8 Marines extracted safely. Zell casualties. Harper's after-action report was 4 pages long, but the relevant section was 3 sentences. Utilized reconnaissance methodology taught by Chief Blackwell and Senior Instructor Drake at NW Advanced Sniper Course. First shot deliberately placed to gather empirical wind data at target location. Without this training, first shot would have been rushed and likely missed, resulting in enemy commander relocating and Marine casualties. The report landed on Admiral Richardson's desk, along with a personal letter Harper had written. "Sir, 2 years ago, I publicly questioned whether Chief Blackwell belonged at the Impossible Shot Challenge. I was wrong, not just wrong about her capability, wrong about what capability means. She did not just teach me to shoot better. She taught me to think better, to be patient when instincts screamed to rush, to observe when training said to act. Marines I saved in Syria are alive because a woman I tried to dismiss taught me that I did not know everything, that there were levels of mastery I had never reached. Please do not shut down this program. It is producing warriors who think as well as they shoot. We need more of that, not less." Richardson had read the letter 3 times, set it aside, tried to dismiss it as an outlier. Ungrateful student did not prove systemic effectiveness. Except Harper's letter was not the only one. Afghanistan. March 2026, 3 months before the documentary premiered, Helmand Province. Captain Bryn Holloway lay prone on a ridge overlooking a valley where patterns of life had changed in the past 48 hours. Taliban fighters were staging, preparing something. And 1,200 meters below her position, a U.S. Army patrol was what instincts told her was an ambush. Bryn was 24 years old, Army Ranger, graduate of the Blackwell Drake Advanced Sniper Course Class 03. She had learned to shoot from her father, had qualified as expert marksman at 19, thought she understood long-range precision until she met 2 women who taught her that technical skill was maybe 20% of what mattered. The other 80% was knowing when to use it. Bryn's spotter, a 32-year-old male ranger with 8 years more experience, was urging her to engage. "Holloway, take the shot. Commander is right there. You have clean line of sight." "Not yet. The patrol is 300 meters from the kill zone." "I know. Then what are you waiting for?" Bryn did not answer. because she was counting mopping wind patterns the way Kiera had taught her, 51 seconds. That was the cycle in this valley. Gust peak at 7 seconds. Stable wind from 44 to 51. But there was something else. Something she had learned from Eleanor Drake in a classroom lecture about environmental systems, thermal columns, rising from the sun-heated rocks at 900 meters, creating turbulence every 28 seconds. If she shot during thermal column formation, the bullet path would be deflected, missed by feet instead of inches, and the Taliban commander would disappear into the cave system before she could adjust. So she waited, counting 2 cycles simultaneously, wind and thermals, looking for the moment when both aligned, when the stable wind window overlapped with thermal column dissipation. Her spotter was nearly frantic now. Holloway, patrol is 200 meters out. If you don't, 42 seconds, she said it calmly, like someone reading a grocery list. What? 42 seconds until optimal firing window. Tell the patrol to hold position. They won't. Tell them now. Something in her voice made him comply. The patrol halted, confused but trusting. Bryn waited. 41 seconds into the wind cycle, 26 seconds into the thermal cycle, 44 seconds, 29, 46, 1. Both cycles entering optimal phase. 7.3 seconds of perfect alignment, 48 seconds. 3. Bryn's breathing slowed. Heart rate dropped. A world contracted to crosshairs and target, and the mathematics of inevitable outcome. Trigger breakpoint 240 meters of flight time. 6.8 seconds. Through her scope, she saw the Taliban commander's shoulder explode, not center mass. He had moved at the last microsecond, turned to shout an order. The bullet that should have struck his chest struck his shoulder instead. He went down, not dead, but incapacitated. The ambush collapsed as fighters scattered. The patrol survived, 12 soldiers, Zhangao casualty. But Bryn felt something unexpected failure. She had made a 240-meter shot under combat stress using advanced methodology that most snipers never learned. She had saved 12 lives, and all she could think was that she had missed center mass. The after-action report praised her. The patrol leader personally thanked her. Her commander recommended her for commendation. But Bryn could not sleep, could not shake the feeling that she had failed some test that mattered more than mission success. Until 2 weeks later, when she was medically evacuated to Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany, not for physical wounds, but for what the psychologist called acute stress reaction with perfectionist cognitive distortion, which was military medicine speak for she was beating herself for being human. Kiera Blackwell flew to Germany. 17 hours of travel. 45 minutes sitting beside a hospital bed, where a young woman who reminded her of herself struggled with the gap between perfect and good enough. I miss ma'am. Bryn's voice was hollow, moved at the last second. And I miss center mass, and he's probably alive somewhere laughing about how some stupid American girl couldn't make the shot. Kiera pulled a chair close to the bed. Sat and did not speak immediately. Just sat with the silence the way she had learned to sit with wind, letting it reveal what it needed to reveal. Finally, she said 3 words. You're not me. Bryn blinked, ma'am. You're not me. You're not Colonel Thornton, not Instructor Drake. You're Bryn Holloway. And you just made a 240-meter shot in combat that saved 12 lives using advanced methodology that took me 10 years to learn. And you absorbed in 6 months. Kiera leaned forward. The Taliban commander moved. Unpredictable variable. You could not have accounted for it because it had not happened yet. You aimed for center mass. The universe moved the target. That's not your failure. That's physics being physics. But if I had been better, if you had been better, you would be God. Are you God, Captain Holloway? No, ma'am. Then stop expecting godlike perfection from human capability. You did everything right. You observed for 40 minutes while your spotter screamed at you to shoot. You mapped 2 environmental cycles simultaneously. You chose the optimal moment. You made the shot. The target moved. 12 soldiers lived. Honor. That instead of obsessing over the imperfection, Bryn was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that broke Kiera's heart. But what if I freeze next time? What if I wait too long and someone dies because I'm trying to be perfect like you? I'm not perfect. You made a 4,000-meter shot that 13 elite snipers missed after 6 minutes of observation and a reconnaissance shot, with no time pressure, no lives on the line except my own career. You made your shot with a patrol in danger, with a spotter screaming, every instinct telling you to rush, and you still waited for the optimal moment. That's not freezing, Bryn. That's mastery under pressure. Kiera reached out, took Bryn's hand. Listen to me. Really listen. The goal is not to be me. The goal is not to shoot like me, or think like me, or replicate what I did at Yuma. The goal is to take what I taught you and make it yours. To adapt it to your strengths. Use it in ways I never imagined. You saved 12 lives today because you trusted your training over your fear. That's not failure. That's exactly what I hoped you would become. Bryn's eyes filled with tears. I was so scared I was letting you down. You could never let me down by being human, Bryn. You'd only let me down by pretending to be something you're not. They sat together for another 30 minutes. Not talking much. Just being present, the way teachers should be for students who carry too much. When Kiera left, Bryn was sleeping peacefully for the first time in 2 weeks. Kiera walked out of that hospital room, understanding something she had not fully grasped before. Teaching was not just about transferring skills. It was about giving permission, Bapper Cerner, to be imperfect. Permission to be human, to be strong in ways that looked different than traditional strength. Bryn's after-action report was filed, with a personal addendum from her company commander. Captain Holloway's 240 engagement demonstrated advanced environmental analysis and tactical patience, consistent with training received from Chief Blackwell and Senior Instructor Drake. Recommend continued emphasis on observation-based methodology in sniper training curricula. Holloway's ability to resist pressure, to engage prematurely prevented multiple friendly casualties. That report also landed on Admiral Richardson's desk, and he could no longer pretend these were isolated incidents. The Blackwell-Drake methodology was producing results in combat, where it mattered. But perhaps the moment that changed Admiral Richardson's mind completely came an unexpected source: his own granddaughter. Emma Richardson was 16 years old, junior at San Diego High School, competitive shooter, member of her school's rifle team, and she had watched The Science of Silence documentary 7 times. At family dinner one Sunday in May, she asked her grandfather a question that stopped him mid-sentence. "Grandpa, why did the Navy try to fire Senior Instructor Drake?" Admiral Richardson set down his fork. "What are you talking about, Emma?" The documentary. It said she was being forced into early retirement until Chief Blackwell refused the promotion unless they kept her. Why would the Navy fire someone with 26 years of experience? Richardson felt uncomfortable. Defensive, military personnel decisions are complex. There were organizational considerations. She was 58. The documentary said 7 other women between 51 and 62 were retired in 18 months. But you're 59, Grandpa. Should you be fired because you're almost 60? That's different. Why? Because realizing what he was about to say, because I'm man, because I'm essential, because my experience matters. All the things that should have applied to Eleanor Drake, but somehow had not. Emma was watching him with the clarity that teenagers sometimes have, the ability to see through bullshit that adults learn to accept. The documentary said Instructor Drake trained over 1,500 snipers, that 63 of them are still in Tier 1 units. That's more than any other instructor in the past 20 years. So why was she being retired? Richardson had no good answer. So Emma provided one. I think it's because she's a woman, and because the military is more comfortable replacing older women than keeping them. Just like tech companies, just like Hollywood, just like everywhere else that decides women expire at 50, but men become distinguished. She paused, then said something that hit harder than any official report. "I'm applying to the Naval Academy, Grandpa. You know that. And I'm going to be a sniper. Because Chief Blackwell showed me that I don't have to be 6 feet tall or weigh 200 pounds to be excellent. But if the Navy is going to push me out at 58 after I've given them decades of service, maybe I should choose a different career. Because I'm not interested in being disposable. She stood from the table. Thanks for dinner. I have homework, and left her grandfather sitting in stunned silence. 3 days later, Admiral Richardson requested a meeting with Chief Blackwell and Senior Instructor Drake. The meeting took place in Richardson's office. Formal, uncomfortable. The Admiral sat behind his desk, looking like a man who had forced to confront something he would have preferred to ignore. Kiera and Ellie sat across from him, waiting. "I'll be direct," Richardson said. "I've reviewed combat validations from your students, read after-action reports from Syria, Afghanistan, and 3 other theaters I cannot discuss. The data is compelling." He paused, choosing words carefully. "I was skeptical of your program, thought it was politically motivated, believed that traditional methodology had worked for decades and changing it was unnecessary risk." Another pause. "I was wrong." Kiera and Ellie exchanged glances. This was not what they had expected. "Your students are performing at levels that exceed previous training outcomes, not just incrementally, significantly. And more importantly, they're thinking, making tactical decisions under pressure that demonstrate judgment as much as technical skill." Richardson leaned forward, recommending to SOCOM that the Blackwell-Drake protocol become mandatory training doctrine across all Tier 1 units, not just Navy, Marines, Army Special Forces, Air Force Special Operations. Everyone. Ellie spoke first. "Sir, may I ask what changed your mind?" Richardson smiled, rueful. "My granddaughter asked me why we were firing you, Instructor Drake, and I didn't have a good answer, because the real answer was one I was ashamed to say out loud." He looked at both women. "I'm also recommending policy change regarding instructor retention. No more mandatory retirement for instructors 65 unless they fail physical or cognitive standards. Those standards will be the same, regardless of gender." He pulled out a file, slid it across the desk. 7 women were forced into early retirement under the Modernization Initiative, authorizing reinstatement for any who want to return, with full back pay and credit toward pension. "It won't undo the damage, but it's a start." Ellie opened the file, read the names. Woman she had worked with, learned from, respected. Women who had been erased and were now being offered a chance to return. "Thank you, sir." Her voice was thick with emotion. "Don't thank me yet. This will face resistance. People like me, who believed that younger automatically meant better, who convinced ourselves that physical capability mattered more than wisdom. You'll have to prove this wasn't a mistake." Kiera spoke quietly. "We've been proving it every day for 16 months, sir. We'll keep proving it for as long as it takes." Richardson nodded. "I believe you will, Chief, which is why I'm also recommending you for promotion to Lieutenant Commander, and Instructor Drake for promotion to Master Chief Senior Instructor. If you're going to shape the future of special operations training, you should have the rank that commands respect." He stood, extended his hand, first to Ellie, then to Kiera. "Thank you for making me see what I was too stubborn to acknowledge. And thank you for not giving up when it would have been easier." As they left his office, Ellie turned to Kiera. "Did that really just happen?" "I think so. He's promoting us, reinstating the women they fired, making our program mandatory across SOCOM, apparently." "Why?" Kiera smiled. "Because his 16-year-old granddaughter called him out on his bullshit at Sunday dinner." They both laughed. Laughter that comes from relief and disbelief, and the recognition that sometimes the most powerful agents of change are the ones you least expect. But the story that would define Kiera's legacy was still being written. In Montana, where an 82-year-old woman was losing her grip on the present, while the past became more vivid than the world around her. November 2026. Kiera received the call on a Tuesday morning. Her grandmother, Maggie, had been moved to hospice care, days remaining, maybe a week, maybe less. Kiera took emergency leave, flew to Montana, drove through landscapes that had not changed since she was a child. Mountains and valleys and big sky country, where winds spoke if you knew how to listen. The memory care facility sat on the outskirts of Glacier National Park, small, well-maintained, the kind of place that tried to make dying comfortable. Maggie's room was on the second-floor window, overlooking the valley she had ranched for 60 years. Kiera pushed open the door, saw her grandmother, smaller than frailer, diminished by disease that took everything slowly, piece by piece, until only the body remained. Maggie's eyes were closed, her breathing shallow and irregular. Nurse, who sat beside the bed, stood when Kiera entered. She's been in and out, mostly confused when she's awake. But she had a lucid period this morning. Asked for you specifically. Did she say my name? She said, tell the quiet girl I'm proud. We think she meant you. Kiera sat in the chair beside the bed, took her grandmother's hand, Thornton, fragile as paper, spotted with age and IV bruises. Hey, Grandma, it's Kiera. I'm here. For a moment, nothing. Then Maggie's eyes opened, cloudy but present. Kiera? Yes, Grandma, you're all grown up. I am. How old? 29. Maggie smiled, small but genuine. I keep forgetting. Sometimes I think you're still 8. Still learning to read deer tracks across the north pasture. I remember those days, Grandma. Did you teach them? Teach who? The warriors. Did you teach them what I taught you? Kiera's throat tightened. Yes, Grandma. I taught them, hundreds of them now, from countries all over the world. British SS, Canadian Special Forces, Australian Commandos, all learning to listen instead of just look. Maggie's smile widened. Good. Your grandfather Roy came home from Korea broken, nightmares every night. Couldn't sleep, couldn't breathe right. Doctors called it combat fatigue. Now they call it PTSD, but it was the same thing. She paused, gathering strength. I taught him to breathe, to count seconds, to wait before acting. Ranch work did that. Mending fence. You can't rush wire or it snaps. Reading weather. You can't force clouds to rain. Gentling horses. You can't dominate them into trust. Her eyes focused on Kiera with sudden clarity. I saved his mind. He taught your father. Thomas taught you. Now you're teaching the world. That's how wisdom survives, child. Not through books. Through hands passing it forward. I couldn't have done it without you, Grandma. Yes, you could. You just would have found a different way. But I'm glad it was my way. Glad my ranch wisdom became military doctrine. Your grandfather would laugh himself sick if he knew. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Maggie said something that changed everything. There's a journal, a storage unit off Highway 2. Unit 47. Code is your birthday, Kiera's. Year, day, month. Go read it after I'm gone? Grandma, promise me, I promise. Maggie closed her eyes, exhausted by the effort of so many words. But she was smiling. And Kiera sat with her, holding her hand, listening to her breathing become slower, shallower, until 3 days later it stopped entirely. Margaret Blackwell, rancher teacher, grandmother, passed peacefully into whatever comes after, surrounded by family, having lived fully, having taught what mattered, having left a legacy that would outlive her by generations. 2 days after the funeral, Kiera drove to the storage facility. Highway 2, Unit 47. She punched in the code, her birthday backwards, 1996-2904. The lock clicked. Inside the unit, she found boxes of ranch records, old photos, equipment from decades past, and in a wooden box wrapped in oilcloth, a journal, leather-bound, worn from handling. Kiera sat on the concrete floor and opened it. The first entry was dated 1953, written in her grandfather's handwriting. Home from Korea. Can't sleep, can't breathe right. Maggie says I need to learn patience again. Says war taught me to act fast. Now I need to learn to wait slow. She's teaching me through ranch work. I think she's saving my life. Kiera turned pages, some from her grandfather, some from Maggie, documenting his healing, his learning to breathe, to observe before acting, trust patience over speed. And then an entry from 1968, Maggie's handwriting. Roy's nightmares are mostly gone now. 15 years of ranch work and patience. He says the techniques I taught him. Counting breath, reading wind, waiting for the perfect moment. Those are the same things his sniper instructors tried to teach, but they taught them as combat skills. I taught them as life skills. He thinks that's why they work better for him. because they weren't about killing. They were about living, the entry continued. He wants to teach Thomas, our son, wants to pass forward what I taught him, but refined, made more precise. I told him yes. But only if he remembers these came from a woman who learned them from cows and horses and weather, not from war. Women have always taught men how to survive. We just don't get credit because the teaching happens in kitchens and barns instead of classrooms and battlefields. Kiera read tears after page. Her grandfather teaching her father. Her father refining those techniques through hunting, planning to teach them to his daughter. And then an entry from 2009, just weeks before her father died. Thomas's handwriting. Kiera's 13 now. She understands wind better than I did at 20. Mom's ranch wisdom runs pure in her. I've taught her everything I know. Refined Mom's instincts into methodology. But I worry I'm pushing too hard, that I'll break something by demanding too much. Dad used to tell me Mom saved his life by teaching him patience. I hope I'm doing the same for Kiera. Teaching her that strength looks like stillness, that power sounds like silence. The journal ended there. Kiera closed it, held it against her chest, and understood something profound. Her grandmother had not just taught her to read wind. Maggie had created a lineage of wisdom that flowed from peace to war and back to peace again, from ranch to combat to teaching, from woman to man to woman to the world. And it had started with a rancher who knew that the best way to heal a broken warrior was not to make him harder, but to teach him to be soft in the right moments. 6 months later, May 2027, Kiera stood at her father's grave, the same remote ridge above the valley Maggie had loved, the same simple stone marker. But she was not alone. Grace Thornton stood beside her, Ellie Drake on her other side, and kneeling at the grave reading the inscription was a 9-year-old girl named Iris Caldwell, daughter of a park ranger, granddaughter of a rancher, who had watched The Science of Silence documentary with her father and asked the question that changed her life. Can Miss Blackwell teach me? Iris looked up at Kiera. Your dad was a soldier, park ranger, but he taught me to shoot. My grandma taught me to read weather. She died last year, I'm sorry, she said. Women are the ones who see things coming, who feel changes before they happen. Is that true? Kiera knelt beside Iris, eye level, the way her father had knelt beside her decades ago. Your grandma was right. But it's not just women. It's anyone who learns to listen instead of just look. Anyone who chooses to understand instead of dominate. She pulled an aspen leaf from her pocket, handed it to Iris. Close your eyes. Hold this. Tell me when the wind will change. Iris took the leaf, closed her eyes. Her face showed intense concentration. 40 seconds passed, maybe 45. Now, the wind shifted exactly on cue. The aspen leaves overhead rustled in a different direction, confirming what the girl had felt before it became obvious. Kiera smiled. You're a natural. How did you know? The leaf got heavier right before, like the wind was gathering itself before moving. That's exactly right. The wind gathers before it shifts. Like a breath before speaking, Kiera looked at Iris's father, standing respectfully back. Sir, with your permission, I'd like to work with your daughter. Teach her to read environment. Not shooting, not yet. Just observation. Learning to see what others miss. Iris's father nodded. Mother taught her to read weather before she passed. Said Iris had the gift. If you can channel that teacher something useful, I'd be grateful. Kiera handed Iris a card with her email. Have your dad reach out. We'll set something up. As Iris and her father left, Grace spoke quietly, starting them younger. Building the next generation, the way Grandma started me, the cycle continues. It has to. Because there will always be people who think quiet means weak, who think patience means passive, who think women expire at 50 while men become distinguished. Kiera looked at Ellie, and there will always be women like us who prove them wrong, not by becoming loud or aggressive or trying to be men, but by being exactly who we are and refusing to apologize for it. Ellie smiled. Damn right. They stood in silence for a moment, 3 generations of warriors. Grace at 65. Still teaching, still learning, still refusing to retire just because society expected women her age to disappear. Ellie at 59. Reinstated with honor, Promoted to Master Chief, proof that experience had value the institution finally recognized. And Kiera at 29, building a legacy that honored those who came before, while creating space for those who would come after. 3 months later, the official ceremony took place at Naval Special Warfare Center, Coronado, California. August 2027, Admiral Richardson presided before an audience of 200 students, instructors, brass from every service branch, international partners from 12 allied nations, and sitting in the front row, Emma Richardson, age 16, wearing her JROTC uniform, already accepted to the Naval Academy class of 2031. Already planning to become the sniper her grandfather once thought women could not be. Admiral Richardson stepped to the podium. Today we formalize what reality has already proven. The Blackwell-Drake Protocol is now mandatory training doctrine across United States Special Operations Command and 23 allied partner nations. Applause. But Richardson held up a hand. This represents more than a change in training methodology. It represents a change in how we think about capability, about wisdom, about who we value and why. He looked directly at Ellie. Senior Instructor Eleanor Drake was nearly forced into retirement at 58, not for poor performance, not for declining capability, but because we as an institution had decided that older women were less valuable than younger replacements. He paused. Letting that sink in, we were wrong. Today, I'm announcing policy changes that ensure we do not make that mistake again. Instructor retention protocols now apply equally regardless of gender. Performance standards remain high, but age alone will never again be used to push out women with institutional knowledge we cannot afford to lose. More applause, louder now. Additionally, I'm pleased to announce that 17 female instructors who were forced into early retirement under the previous policy have been offered reinstatement with full rank restoration and back pay. 7 have already accepted and will return to teaching positions across special warfare schools. He gestured to Kiera and Ellie. Please join me. They walked to the podium. Richardson opened 2 presentation boxes. Lieutenant Commander Kiera Blackwell. By order of the Chief of Naval Operations, you are hereby promoted effective immediately. He pinned the new rank on her uniform. Master Chief Senior Instructor Eleanor Drake. By order of the Chief of Naval Operations, you are hereby promoted effective immediately. He pinned the rank, then stepped back, saluted. Both women returned the salute, and the room erupted. Not just applause now, but standing ovation. From students who had learned that strength looked different than they expected. From male instructors who had learned that their way was not the only way. From female instructors who had watched 2 refuse to accept a system designed to erase them. And from one 16-year-old girl who saw a future that had not existed when her grandmother was young, where women did not have to choose between career and age, where wisdom was valued over youth, where quiet competence defeated loud arrogance every single time. That evening, Kiera walked alone along the beach near Coronado, feet in the sand, tide coming in, wind carrying salt and stories. Her phone buzzed a text from Grace. You changed the world, ghost. Your grandmother would be proud. Kiera smiled. Tied a response. We changed it together, all of us. Every woman who refused to disappear quietly. Another text. This one from a number she did not recognize. This is Iris. My dad helped me set up email. Can you teach me more about reading wind? I want to be like you when I grow up. Kiera stopped walking, looked out at the Pacific, at waves that had been moving like this for millennia, at sunset painting the sky orange and gold, at a world that was different now, not because one woman made an impossible shot, but because that woman learned from a grandmother, who learned from a grandfather, who learned from a wife, who learned from cows and horses and weather. And because that lineage of wisdom refused to end, refused to be forgotten, refused to let the world decide that quiet women were worth less than loud men, or that older women were worth less than younger ones, or that there was only one way to be strong. Kiera texted back, yes, I'll teach you, not to be like me, but to be like yourself. The best version of who you already are. She looked at the horizon, where sky met water, where impossible met inevitable, and whispered three words her grandmother had said in that hospital room. I'm proud too. The wind carried those words out over the ocean, to wherever Maggie was now, to wherever all the quiet women went when their work was done. And the silence before the next wave, before the next shot, before the next generation of women who would refuse to be invisible, held everything that mattered. All the legacy, all the love, all the wisdom passed from hands that gentled horses to hands that changed institutions to hands not yet born who would carry it forward forever. Margaret, Maggie, Blackwell, 1944-2026. Montana rancher. She taught her husband to find peace after war, her son to find patience in precision, and her granddaughter to find power in silence. In August 2024, Lieutenant Commander Kiera Blackwell made a 4,000-meter shot that changed military sniper training forever. But the shot was never the point. The silence before it was. The Blackwell-Drake Protocol is now standard doctrine across U.S. Special Operations Command and 23 allied nations. Lieutenant Commander Kiera Blackwell and Master Chief Senior Instructor Eleanor Drake continue to teach at Special Warfare Center, Coronado, California. In 2026, the Department of Defense reversed its modernization initiative and began actively recruiting female instructors over age 50. 17 women were reinstated to teaching positions. Iris Caldwell began formal training at age 12. As of 2032, she is 14 years old and has been accepted to a JROTC leadership program with aspirations for the Naval Academy class of 2040.